Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Vitality Health and Wellbeing series. My name is Jamie and I am a former runner, a physiologist and now part of the coaching team at Vitality. Firstly, thanks so much for choosing to spend the time with us today. We really appreciate you being here. And today's conversation is one that I think is super important, and at Vitality we're really committed to developing and maintaining the long-term growth of women's sport. We partner with women's teams in the top flights of football, cricket, netball. We partner with hockey, and we also support women's running communities, as well as partnering with the charity Women in Sport. And I think we really do value and understand the importance of equal opportunity, and we'll wholeheartedly do as much as we can to work towards encouraging participation in all sport for all levels. And our guest today has demonstrated incredible resilience and determination throughout her hugely successful career, and in my opinion and that of many others, to be a catalyst in transforming women's professional sport for future generations. Kelly Smith is widely regarded as one of the greatest ever women's footballers, winning I think 20 trophies for her beloved Arsenal and scoring a record-breaking 46 goals for England. Now, in sport, I'd say there's possibly a handful of athletes who can match Kelly's sporting successes, and we hear those stories rarely, but they are there. But I would personally argue that there's actually no one who has overcome as much challenge along the way to get to those achievements. So Kelly, thank you so much for your time today. It's a real privilege for you to join us. Firstly, how are you doing?
Hi Jamie, how are you? I'm good, thank you.
Very good. First step out the way, by the way, the tech is all working. Hopefully everyone can see and hear us. Now my stress levels do reduce massively. And for everyone watching, please do navigate yourselves to the right-hand side of your screens where you'll find a questions box. We have considered all of your pre-registered questions and we'll incorporate these throughout, but please do post your comments and your questions in there, and Johnny's behind the scenes answering to all of those. And also while I'm there, please do download the handout section where you can find our full events program for April. But this is our first event of the month, Kelly, and I think it's a pretty strong way for us to start. And I'm actually gonna, on that note, start with obviously your story and how it all began. And I'm always fascinated by how kind of people's stories and their early years experiences shape their, I think their values, and maybe ultimately that shapes their future. And Kelly, I'll be honest with you, I've done my research. It's not stalking, but I do know a little bit about you. I know that you grew up in Watford, for example, not too far away from where I grew up. And your challenges, I would say, and your journey with football started pretty early in your first club. So would you mind kind of sharing with us what it was like for you playing for traditionally in a boys' team, and how you were treated through that?
Yeah, sure. When I first started playing football, having a ball at my feet from the age of 6 years old, and all I would do is just juggle the ball, hit it against the garage, and play one touch football back and forth. And my brother was younger, so we used to play in the lounge against each other. We used to put the sofas out as goals, and we'd always have a light football. And then when we broke some vases or some flowers fell off onto the floor, my mum said football's banned in the house. So we then rolled up some socks, or we got creative and used a balloon. So I always had this love for football at a very young age. I'd even walk to school kicking a tennis ball, or if I didn't have a tennis ball, I'd kick a stone. So I always had something at my feet. And my brother played for a football team. There were no girls' teams for me to play on. So I just, used to practice my skills in the back garden by myself. And my brother started playing for a football team, and I used to go and watch him play on Garston Park. And I used to run down the hill and collect the balls that went off the pitch, and I'd dribble it back up the pitch, hoping that the coaches are looking and seeing that I've got some skills to dribble the ball back up, hoping that they'd ask me to play for the team. That never happened, so my dad approached my brother's team's older age group and said, look, Kelly really wants to play, could you play, she's quite good. And the manager said at the time, yeah, let's come over and let's have a look at her. So I started playing for Garston boys under 8s at the age of 8, and we started playing every Sunday, training 1 day a week. And I was a bit of a tomboy back then, so I had short hair, but the boys that I would play with knew that I was a girl. So we'd be playing against the other opposition every Sunday, and I would be scoring a lot of goals per game, 5, 6, 7 goals, assisting. and being the standout player. And each report in the newspaper was like, Kelly Smith scored 8 goals this game, and the word got out that there was this really good boy playing for Garston Boys.
Wow.
And it wasn't until the opposition's parents found out that I was a girl, and that really become a problem. As I said, not the boys that I was playing with on my team, it was the parents that I was playing against, because I think I was embarrassing their sons by dribbling around them with ease, probably the best player on the pitch, not saying that big-headed, but I was. And yeah, it became a problem, because every team that I was playing against, the parents had a problem with the fact that I was a girl and embarrassing their sons. So they said, right, this game is for boys, girls shouldn't be playing. And I used to hear, break her legs. I'm only 8 at this point. Break her legs, she shouldn't be playing, get her off, who does she think she is? And that, for me, at the age of 8, was just heartbreaking, because, you know, I was just playing with my friends. I was just doing something that I loved and I was good at and had a passion for. So my dad, then teams refused to play against my team because I was the wrong sex. So I had to stop playing. So my dad sat me down and said, look, Kelly, you can't play this sport. Why don't we look at another sport? Let's do netball, let's do hockey, the traditional girls' sports in that era. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to play football. So he said, all right, let's find another team for you to play on. So we went across town and I played for a team called Herons. Same thing happened, you know, scoring a lot of goals a game, being recognised. And then the parents found out that I was a female and didn't want me playing. So the same thing happened. My dad sat me down, told me that I couldn't play. Just devastating. I remember crying, like, I just don't understand why this is happening to me. Yeah. And yeah, it was soul destroying, because then we had to look in. There was no internet back then. We didn't know about girls football, so we had to look in the paper and find a girls team, and we had to travel. Then I was obviously in Watford, but we had to travel to Pinner, and that was the nearest girls team for me to play on, 45 minutes away.
You mentioned it a couple of times there. As an 8-year-old, you must not be able to compute what's happening and why it's happening. Did you have an appreciation of the reasons for why the other sort of parents didn't want you to play? Because even now, as an adult, we could never that could never be accepted. And so I think that, again, this is what we'll come to later in the conversation, is how your journey has changed the journey for future generations, which is why it's so powerful. But back then, as an 8-year-old, how did your dad kind of approach you? Was he accepting of it? And as an 8-year-old, was it just the case of it was really upsetting, or did you think any more into it than that?
I just didn't understand it, because I was good at it, and I enjoyed playing it with my friends. And I think that really set me up to go on and achieve the things that I did in my career, because it added some fire in my belly. And made me quite angry that people were telling me that I couldn't play when I just wanted to be a footballer. So I think that, like, fired me up, and wanted to prove a lot of people wrong early on in my career. To be told that you can't do something, it was just frustrating. I was angry, I was upset, I was hurt, but I used that to go on and practice even harder. You know, I used to have a ball at my feet all the time, thinking I'm going to prove these people wrong. I'm going to be one of the best players that and want to be the best player that I could be. Yeah,
I think that everyone has 2 options to take in a situation like that, and I love the fact that you chose that one. I've actually got a quote Hope Powell said about you. I'm sure you've probably had this before, but she said something like, Kelly is kind of one of those players that only come along once or twice in a lifetime. In the men's game, you'd think of players like Maradona or Messi, players with a unique talent, and that's what Kelly is. So on that point of talent, what was your relationship like with your talent? Because clearly you were naturally gifted, but I would say added to that talent was that you had a talent for hard work and that determination. But did you always feel like football was your purpose and that's what you should be doing? Because I know other athletes who are unbelievably talented maybe don't have that drive for hard work. So how did you look at, like, your ability versus how hard you had to work, and did ever one compromise the other?
Yeah, I think I was born with a talent, like you said. I don't know where it come from, because my parents weren't really interested in football. And I knew I had a talent, and I think I just wanted to develop it. And I studied the game from a very young age. I'd always watch Match of the Day on a Saturday night, and Ryan Giggs was my favourite footballer at the time. mainly because we played in the same position. We were both left-footed, we were both on the wing, we both had speed, we were both good dribblers, and I just used to watch him. And even if I fell asleep during watching the game, I would have recorded it and watched it in the morning. And I'd watch him and see what he did in certain situations on the pitch. What decision did he make in a certain area? When did he take players on? Was there space in front of him? When did he cross the ball? How did he finish? And I went away then and practiced that in the back garden at playtime, when the bell rang for playtime, when we were playing jumpers down for goalposts. I'd practice all that kind of stuff and have that memory of watching him. I also used to love Ian Wright because his energy, his enthusiasm, his love, his smile that he had, he just loved to play the game, and I just kind of drew on them to what they had and kind of made it my own. So that's kind of where from a kid I lived and breathed football and wanted to study it and watch games and have like different patterns in my mind of how different players moved and see things, and then go and emulate that in my own time in my different games that I played.
Yeah, I'm so glad you gave that answer, because we'll have a lot of parents and coaches and things like that that watch this interview, and we did an interview recently with David Young, who's the sports psychologist at Man City, and the question came up about what the difference is between the world's very, very best, the most elite people like you in your bracket, versus the kind of people that make it to professional level. And he said they do undeniably have talent, which you've recognized. But what he said above and beyond that they have is an ability to do the mundane tasks every single day and to apply the things that you need to do on top of your talent. And I think, again, if you're a parent and you're recognizing you all want the best for your kids, but you need to have those fundamental skills. And is that something that you think is innate with you, or do you think it was encouraged from your environment?
I think from my environment, I think, like I said, I knew I had a talent, but talent isn't good enough. You have to go out and work and fine tune it. And fitness is a big part of football. You can have all the talent in the world and not be fit and not last games. So I had to go out and do extra fitness work. Because the women's game at that time, we're only training 2 evenings a week, which for me, how can you get fit and last 90 plus minutes only training 2 evenings a week? So you had to do more. You had to go away on your own and do my own fitness in the park. I'd tie my dog up at the goalpost and I'd put cones down and I'd do my shuttles and I'd run around the park and I'd just try and get my endurance better than everybody else, because I knew ultimately that my talent would not do that alone. I had to be fitter and I had to work at that away from the team environment, because I wasn't getting that from that environment.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And at Vitality, we actually recently did some research on the effect of the pandemic on women in particular. And a key finding from that was kind of about the increase in the gender play gap. So we were discussing actually beforehand, only a couple of weeks ago, we saw a record attendance to a women's game for Barcelona versus Real Madrid with over 90,000 fans at the stadium. And you mentioned there about moving away to America. And I think that the decisions that you made as a young player have had a huge impact on the trajectory of the game. But you kind of alluded to it there, but like during the early stages of your career, can you tell me a little bit more as to why you felt like you needed to leave and the sort of importance of that in your career and personal journey?
Yeah, I think from early on, I wanted to be a professional footballer, but there was no professional league in England at the time. For me, it was always Arsenal were the team that you'd heard about. And I was playing for a team called Wembley at the time, and I was, putting in some really good performances. And finally, I had a call from the manager, Vic Akers, at the time saying, we've seen how talented you are. Will you come across to Arsenal? And Arsenal was my team. So I was like, oh my God, like living the dream, thinking that I want to be a professional footballer. It wasn't happening in England at the time, but to play for Arsenal, I know they'd got the best of everything. So I went and signed for them. And then I just wasn't seeing progression in the women's game. I didn't feel like other teams were taking the football seriously. The FA weren't really putting money behind it and supporting it. And I got scouted. I got an opportunity to get a soccer scholarship in America, which meant me leaving my home, 17, 18, I think, 18. to go abroad. And for me, at that time, you know, American football, American soccer, as they say, was a lot bigger. You heard about it over there. And I made a big decision because I wanted to be a professional footballer. I knew it wasn't going to happen for me in England. I had to get out of my comfort zone as a young kid and leave my friends and family and take this big leap of faith to go across to New Jersey, where I knew no one, and put myself in an environment where I studied, but I also was training in the football team every day. So we'd study in the daytime, and then at 3 o'clock we'd be on the football pitch training. So every day it felt to me like I was a professional footballer because I was touching the ball every day, which is what I wanted to do. So I was also getting an education. So the two come hand in hand. And then in 1999, the women's team, the US women's team, won the World Cup. So the game was absolutely booming out there. You know, Mia Hamm, Bradley Chastain, Julie Foudy, these are big names within the US soccer players at this time, were very renowned. And then the women's professional league started. So I put myself in an environment, in a college environment, where I'd won all these awards, was recognised. And then luckily enough for me, which was a dream come true, the league started the next year as soon as I graduated. So I put myself in that place where I would now jump into the professional game over there.
I think I'm right in saying that you signed your first professional contract. Was it with the New Jersey Lady Stallions? Is that their name?
That was semi-pro. My first professional contract was with Philadelphia in 2001.
Okay, cool. So sort of 99 you were semi-pro, 2001 you turned pro. And what was your journey like into becoming a professional? Because again, like, look at the system these days, it's academies, your path is pretty much laid out. So you mentioned you're in the college system, but then how did that translate into you're now going to do that as your actual job and be paid for it? How was that process?
Well, I graduated from my university, and then I coached a little bit at the university as an assistant coach. Then the league formed. But I think because of the name that I had gained and the recognition that I got throughout my collegiate career, you know, I was picked second in the international draft ahead of Marta, who was the top Brazilian player at the time, and Philadelphia wanted me. So to go as a second pick as a young 21-year-old, it was quite an achievement. And I played 3 years in Philadelphia, but that's kind of when I was living my dream, absolutely loving it, being a professional footballer, what I'd always wanted to do. And that's when my first big injury happened in that first season. So that was hard to take.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I know injury is a huge part of your journey. And I think you said something really nice at the start, actually, that if you hadn't have had those experiences from playing in a boys team and being asked not to play by parents, you wouldn't have necessarily had that drive. So I think that injuries is something that can affect everyone. And an injury for me is something which impacts your progress. So for the people in the workplace, that's an illness, you know, it doesn't have to be physical ailments. And I know, Kelly, you did overcome and have to go through so many injuries throughout your career. So what I'm really interested in is kind of like, if you're able to talk us through your mindset when dealing with an injury. So what's your initial approach? Like, are there stages in a process that you have lined out? And what's your way of navigating yourself back to full health?
Yeah, my first injury was in my first season for Philly. I remember it to this day. I was running down the wing, tried to cross the ball, and I heard a massive pop in my right knee. And the pain instantly happened. I was in denial. I knew I'd torn my ACL, which is a common injury to do in football. I knew it, but I was in denial. I went to hospital, had air and everything. And it was confirmed through a scan that I tore my ACL. So after getting through that denial and thinking, right, I haven't got any football now for a long time. I think this injury took me 6 months to come back from. The hardest thing was seeing my teammates. You know, I was in the rehab room daily, going in long hours, seeing my teammates in the locker room, and they were going out. That was the hardest thing for me to take, because you didn't feel a part of a team. I lost my identity when I was injured, because I'd only viewed myself as a footballer. And that's because probably I was quite young, and that's all I wanted to do. I didn't really have any other interests, which I learned later on in my career, that you need to have other things, not just football, because when football was taken away from me, I lost myself. And
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to cope. I was quite a shy, reserved character back then. Didn't really know how to communicate that well with my peers, with my teammates. I was very introverted. So when I didn't have football, I didn't know who I was. And that's when I kind of turned to alcohol after rehab, going through rehab with the physio on a daily basis. I'd be in at 9 o'clock, I'd be done by 3, and I'd come back to my apartment and I'd just start drinking because I didn't know how to cope with the loss of football. And that would happen daily and daily and daily, and it just got, it was very difficult to deal with because I didn't tell anyone how I was feeling. And how low I was. I was hiding it, and that was even harder. I was just numbing myself because I didn't know how to be.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and it maybe comes from the fact that your whole life you've had that drive and purpose to be a footballer, and that is maybe what you thought defined you. I know Gary Neville's spoken about his time at Valencia as saying, he's got this famous line now that he says that something like failure is a bruise, not a tattoo kind of thing, and it doesn't necessarily define you, but when you're in it, you don't know anything other than that. And I wanted to actually talk about like coping strategies, and that could be anything, because actually they can be positive, they can be negative, and all of the things that you've been through were maybe necessary for you to get to the outcomes that you did. And we've just had a question come in, which is a really straightforward question, but I think it's a good one. Like, how did you use all of these challenges and all of these setbacks to drive you forward? Because I think you're unique in your talent, but I think you're unique in your mindset that you can just push on and use it as fuel. But are you able to understand how you do that, or what sort of things you put in place to do that? I don't know if it's goal setting or I don't know, but you've got an ability to take a negative, maybe have to deal with it a certain way, but then use it as fuel to push you forward.
Yeah, I didn't deal with my injuries in a very good way, if I'm honest, because every injury happened. I didn't get small injuries. I got long-term injuries. My first injury was 6 months. I come back the second year at Philadelphia, and I jumped up for a header and got hit with the same knee and heard a crunch. I was out of the game for 9 months that time. And again, the same cycle happened, drinking a lot, not coping, not dealing with it, not talking to anybody. The third injury, I had a tackle from behind, broke my leg. But I think the fire in my belly to always try and get back and to be better than I was before was what drove me. I don't think it's any kind of secret recipe that I had, but I always wanted to prove people wrong, that I can play football and I want to be one of the best players in the world. I wanted to play in World Cups, I wanted to play in European Championships, and I wasn't prepared to let that go. I needed to work hard every day to get back on the field and try and become better than I was the previous time, whether it's in working harder in the gym or out on the pitch, technically staying behind after training, working on your free kicks, working on your dribbling, crossing techniques. It was something that I always wanted to do because I know I needed to do that extra to be better.
Do you think that drive and that desire affected your mental well-being? Because if you weren't able to do that, how would it make you feel?
If I weren't able to do that, how would it move? Can you rephrase that?
So if your drive and all of your intention was towards being better than you were and to be the best and to prove people wrong, and did that come at the effect of the detriment of your mental health because you're constantly having to push? And were you ever satisfied with where you were? Because I know injuries are a real huge issue for athletes, and that does affect their sort of state physically and mentally. So kind of for you, if you weren't able to push towards that goal, were you able to manage life outside of not being a footballer? Like, how did you, how were you able to just be content with going about your everyday life, or was it all about having to be a footballer?
Yeah, for me, it was all or nothing. I had to be a footballer. And I think that's probably why I struggled so much, because of the injuries that I had, serious injuries back to back. I couldn't cope with the loss of football, and alcohol was a common theme for years, for about 5 or 6 years. I totaled up the years that I probably missed in football, and it was about 5 years.
Wow.
With the length of the injuries, I had 2 knee surgeries, 2 broken legs, ripped the ligaments off my ankle bone, and that throughout the course of my career was about five years. But yeah, I didn't deal with the injuries. You know, it wasn't until the latter part of my career that I got the help that I needed, and I was meeting with a counsellor and a psychologist and talking and being open about my feelings. And I think with age too, I learned how to deal with that better by communicating.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think learning as you get older and what you did wrong and how you're going to move forward and do things better was how I did it, really.
Yeah, it sounds like you were just, that is such a horrific list of injuries. And it seems like you were really hard on yourself to have to try and push back as soon as possible. What advice would you give to your younger self now, having been through that? And you said later in your career, you kind of had the support that you needed to cope better with those injuries and things. What was it that you learned that would have helped you at a younger age?
I think it was more to be more open. As I said, I was quite shy, quite introverted. I think if I was young, telling myself now, I'll be like, open up, talk to your teammates more, talk to your coaches more, talk about how you're feeling, because I just kept everything inside, and that's what hurt me. So I would just say, be open, be honest, tell people how you're feeling, whether it's a coach, whether it's a colleague, whether it's your parents, whether it's your friend, because that offloads you, and then you can, they can help you. Whereas I just kept everything in and was dying inside. So yeah, being open and opening up to people, I think that helps. And then, a problem, well, my mum used to say, a problem shared is a problem solved.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be the main thing.
Nice. And I think that's something that is said so much more now, but it's such a worthwhile point in mentioning it, that it wasn't back when
Mm.
you were a player and you didn't have that. And I think kind of looking at the game now, it seems like athletes and players in the women's sport world are able to build kind of global profiles around themselves. So thinking of the women's game now, you've got players like Sam Kerr or like Megan Rapinoe, Lucy Bronze, Alex Morgan, Fran Kirby. They're all players that we all know, and I think they've established themselves as faces of the game. So I credit your journey as crucial in getting to the point that we are at today, and the ability for those players to be able to have those platforms. How was it during your playing career in terms of the opportunities that they were around? And how do you reflect on the game now? Essentially, like, would you rather be a player now versus back then, or do you look at it as being proud of being part of the evolution of the game?
Yeah, I think I get asked that question a lot. Should I have been born 10 years later? But I just think I was born at the right time to help develop and grow the game and do my thing. I'm not jealous. I'm not envious of the way the game is now. I'm pleased and proud that I had a small part to play in it, and my journey helping develop the game and push the game. I still now do work in the media to help promote the women's game. But yeah, I think now the women's game is in such a healthy place. Big brands and sponsors now are coming on like Vitality and realizing the growth and the potential within the women's game. Big sponsors coming on board, seeing that. Don't forget that the women's game was banned 50 years ago from the FA, so women couldn't play football. So we're like a lot of ways behind in so many aspects of the game, in terms of grassroots, in terms of financial, pay structure for the women, stadiums, facilities, grassroots, everything. We're a little bit further behind, but to see where it is now, the TV deals I think have really helped. It's about visibility. We now have BBC and Sky showing regular games. ITV have signed up the rights for the Lionesses, the England team. We've got a big tournament in the summer. The Euros are home Euros. So yeah, I just see it as brilliant. I'm really happy with the way the game's growing. I just hope England can win the tournament this summer, and I think the game will be elevated even more.
Yeah, I think you're right. You were probably the right person at the right time to bring the game to where it needs to be now. Just a side note, what do you think what's your thoughts on England's chances this summer?
I think they've got a very good chance. I think they've got the right manager in charge in Serena. I know they've had quite an easy qualification campaign for the World Cup and the games have been a little bit disheartening with very big score lines, but that's not England's fault. I think there's something for FIFA and UEFA to look at in terms of the competition and developing those other nations. But I think the FA now taken on board and really pushed the women's game and put a lot of backing behind it. It seems more equal now as to when I was playing, but it was just always the men and the women were always left behind and got all the crappy kit and the crappy training facilities. But now, as you know, the Lionesses train at St George's Park, there's a lot of youth age groups now. When I was playing, it was thrown straight into the senior side. At the age of 16, I was, when I first played for 17, when I first played for England, and that was way too young. Now there's a youth structure, a pathway, a ladder for young girls to, if they want to play for the Lionesses. There's a under 15s and under 17s, 19s, 23. So there's an infrastructure there now. So yeah, I think with the attacking talent that England have, Lauren Hemp, I think, has been outstanding for Chelsea. Frank Kirby, who you mentioned earlier, a very good talent. Liam Williamson of Arsenal has just been named captain. I think that's a great statement. I think they've got the squad. I think they've got the experience now, and the young players coming through. I think they're very hungry, and I think also England have lost in the last 3 major tournaments in the semi-finals, and I know that hurts. That hurts the players. So with it being on home soil, home fans behind the Lionesses, if they can just deal with the pressure of that, I think they've got a very, very good chance of winning it.
Yeah, I think it's been great to see as well that we've all seen such a quick period of growth, and it's everyone can kind of recognize the differences in the investment and that's making. And it also seems like that the men's game and having success last summer, everyone seems to be enthused and encouraged about the women's game as well. So hopefully we'll create that same kind of atmosphere and everyone can get behind the team this summer as well. But Kelly, I want to kind of talk about the element of decision making around the things that you did in your career and how maybe resilience played into that, but also maybe the setbacks and challenges that you faced. And one thing that I know as an athlete you do get is different offers, and you get different contracts, and there's big decisions because you have quite a short career as an athlete, and the decisions you make can have an impact for your playing career, but way beyond that. And we're kind of just interested to understand about how you went about making the big decisions that you did, and sort of what were the factors that you needed to consider when making those decisions.
Well, the first big first contract was for Arsenal, and that was for me a no-brainer really, because that was the club that I supported as a kid growing up. I remember going and watching the team at Highbury. So that was it was a tough decision because I was quite comfortable playing for Wembley at the time. Sorry, something. Yeah, but yeah, it's taken a leap of faith and following your heart, following your dream, and doing that. And I think that was an easier decision for me. And then obviously the next decision that came quite quickly after that, I'd only played a season for Arsenal, and then I got spotted to go to America. So that was a massive decision for me, being so young, very tough. I remember sitting down with my parents and saying, I want to go, I want to do this, but I'm so scared, I'm so young. It was such a tough decision, but we come around it and we said, well, what do you really want to do in life? I said, I want to be a professional footballer. I said, they said, well, you've got to go then. And it wasn't until years and years later, they didn't want me to go, my parents. They thought it was a bad decision because they were losing their daughter at a very young age, but they knew that I had to do that for myself and my development. So that one was probably the hardest decision I ever had to make, but I had to do it because that's the career that I had to follow, that pathway to put myself in a professional environment. And then the league folded in America for the first season. I had to come back to England. Unfortunate enough, I re-signed back for Arsenal, and that was a good decision because, again, Vic Akers and I like that, and it was good to be back involved at Arsenal. But again, I was frustrated because the teams were only training 3 times a week, 3 evenings a week. So it was like I'd been demoted a little bit. But I had to keep going, I had to keep persevering, keep believing. And then another opportunity come for me to go to Boston. The professional league started back up in America. And, I felt loyal to Arsenal at the time because I'd left them and come back to Arsenal and was playing really well and winning a couple of league titles. But when this opportunity came of being a professional footballer again, it was like the light bulbs went on in my head, and I was like, I have to do it. It's not fully professional in this country, and I'm not getting what I need. So I had to go. I felt sad because I felt like I was letting Arsenal down again by leaving. But I had to do it for myself selfishly. I had to put myself in an elite professional environment again, because it wasn't happening in England at the time. But now I get like a lot of young girls saying to me, because they still see the lights of America, and it being the best league out there. And I say, you don't have to go to America like I did, because the way the league is in this country, the investment, the infrastructure now, and you know, the support that the clubs have behind it, and the FA and the TV deals, the visibility now, for me, stay in this country, because if it's not the best league in the world now, it will be in the next few years, because all the top talent from all across Europe, we've had American players come over, and that for me just says it all, the level of talent that we have abroad and the youth that we're bringing through. You have everything in this country now, whereas I had to leave, had to make decisions to go to better myself, which was very difficult. But yeah, it's happening now.
Yeah, it's brave decisions you make, and I think you said something there kind of about how the second time that you had the offer to go to Boston to leave, it almost felt like you were letting Arsenal down. But it seems to me like they weren't able to cater for you, and in a way, like it can relate to that in business. You know, if you can't suit the needs and desires of someone, it's the best thing for you and for them to go. So obviously, I know you came back as well after that. Were they always supportive of understanding your talent and actually, do you know what, we can see that it would be selfish for us to keep you at this point?
Yeah, I felt really disheartened, because I felt like I was letting the club down, because they took me back and I'm leaving again. But it is, you think you have to look after yourself and how you are going to better yourself. And like you said, Arsenal weren't at that level at the moment where it was fully professional. The whole league structure wasn't there yet. And it was a very, very difficult decision. But I think that what's also important for me is that I kept really good ties with the club, with Vic Akers, with Claire Wheatley, the general manager at the time. We didn't leave on bad terms. I was very honest, very open as to the reasons why I was going, and we left on good terms. So if I ever wanted to return again, the door would always be open. So I think that was, you know, a good move for both of us, really, and really appreciated the fact that I'd left them twice and they still took me back.
That's how good you are. I wanted to actually talk a little bit about kind of like how your sort of mindset was affected potentially by the injuries, and specifically your self-belief, because to make a decision to move away from Arsenal, where I'm sure it was comfortable, it's the club that you know and love, and they were always fully supportive of you, to take another decision to step away, and having been through injuries, did you always have the self-belief that you were able to be the best still? I'm just conscious that we're doing an event next week, for example, on imposter syndrome, and that's something that I know so many people relate to, and it's been a really popular topic. And even in the questions now, people are asking about, like, how did you know that you could do it? And yeah, what's your view on your own self-belief? Because you recognize your talent, but did you always think, I am what everyone says I am?
That's a good question. I knew I was very talented, but I had to believe it myself too. And when the hours that I put in that no one was seeing, build your confidence. And yeah, I always had a very strong self-belief. And like I said before, every injury that I had, don't get me wrong, there were times when I didn't. There was my third injury when I was so low, suicidal low. I didn't want to play football anymore. In my mind, I was done with it, because every time that I tried to work hard in the rehab room, get back, get myself in good physical shape again, another injury would come straight after it. And that just kept hammering me down into the ground. I'll get back again, and another one will come along, another 6-month injury, broken leg. And I just wanted to give up, but I didn't. And I think that's what I'm proud of to this day, because there were times when I wanted to quit and give up and just stick the fingers up to football and say, I'm done with you. But there was something inside me that just kept saying, just keep fighting, you'll do this. You have the belief to be one of the best players in the world, to play in a World Cup. That was your dream, that is your ambition. You've got to keep going. And I didn't give up. And as hard as it was and as low as I was, I could have. And that's where it relates back to me being kicked off of 2 boys teams when saying that you can't do it. I wanted to do it. I have to do it. I need to play football. I want to play football. I want to be the best. And then that relates to my injuries. I still needed to get there. I still wanted to be recognised as one of the best players in the world because I knew I had the talent. I just had to get a break, get a good few games, no injuries, and the belief that I had to be one of the best players for England was always there. And that was my driver. That was my strength to hold on to that.
It almost feels like you felt like you owe your talent something, like you need to achieve because that's what you've been given, and you've worked so hard to sort of make use of what you've been given. And I think there's a really good question that's just come in as well about how other teammates have seen you as well with different teams, and specifically Arsenal, because there would have been, when you left and came back, there'd have been players that were there before, and how did you manage those relationships? Because I know teammates, similar to work colleagues, end up being friends, and how was that received, and how did you manage that? Because that must have been a big part of affecting your decision.
Yeah, it was difficult because as I said before, I felt like I wasn't being loyal to the club. And then when I went away to Boston and come back, there was a few different players in there, but some of the players that were still there, I could sense there was a bit of angst, bit of jealousy with the fact that I'm back, and I'm only back because the league folded. So that was kind of hard to deal with emotionally, because you just felt that they weren't being true and honest to you. But I think you just had to keep going and keep performing on a daily basis in training and giving 110% at everything that you do in the sessions, and buying into what the manager's saying and doing extra. And then finally, those two or three that were envious or jealous of me coming back into the side, I kind of won them over, and it you know, assisting them on a goal or something like that helped.
Yeah.
Because the supply was coming. But yeah, there's been a couple of players that have been a little bit not so happy of me jumping back and forth, because they were loyal to the club, they stuck with the club, but then maybe they didn't get those opportunities that I had to go out professionally, or maybe they didn't have the goals and ambitions that I did. So there was a jealous moments.
Yeah, I'm sure when you came back and banged in a load of goals and won them some trophies, that was all quickly forgiven. Kelly, I think another theme which is really relevant to viewers is around uncertainty, and with injuries and setbacks and moves and things like that. I'm sure that was something that you experienced a lot as well. And I appreciate contracts in football in particular are never permanent. So when there was noise around contracts or sort of pressure around maybe new potential contracts and things, do you ever think that affected your performance, and were you able to manage those external kind of pressures?
I think when the move for Boston was in the pipeline, it did affect me mentally a little bit, because I was torn at the time whether do I go, I want to go. And my performances probably dipped a little bit because my focus wasn't there as much. But I think I had to have conversations with my manager and just be open and honest and say, look, this is where my head's at the minute, and just be open and honest with where I'm at. And a couple of times I was not performing to the levels that I should have, and I wasn't playing. He put me on the bench. And then that gave me the kick up the bum that I needed to say, right, I need to get focused now and just need to perform. Or I can't control what happens off the pitch in terms of what the manager's saying, thinking, or the other players. I just have to get down and perform, and make things happen. And then the decision was made for me in terms of me wanting to go back and being a professional footballer again. I think you have to do right, what feels right, what in your gut feels right for you to do to progress your career.
It seems like focusing on the process of doing the main thing really well looks after the kind of decisions outside of that. And look, Kelly, you had to make so many big decisions, and from everything like, do I go again? Do I move to another country? Like, they're huge decisions. Looking back on everything that you went through, would you have done anything differently, would you say?
No, I think because I think my path was kind of laid out for me, and that's what was supposed to be. I was supposed to go through those struggles, those big decisions, that the heartache of the injuries, that tested me from bottom up as to my character and my resilience, and how am I going to deal with this one. I think I wouldn't change anything really, because as I said, it was supposed to be the path that I led. I wouldn't change the era that I played in. I think I was just I just had to navigate my way through it myself, my own way, and learn about my mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
I think changing anything would help.
Those parents will, I wonder what they think now, but they've actually been clearly a huge driver in your career. So if you wanted to prove them wrong back then, I'm pretty sure you did do that. Another interesting point that someone just made as well is that it sounds like your relationship with Vic Akers and all of the managers that you had, that they were very understanding of your career and your aspirations. But how did you deal with that? Because if you're a player and you're a star player and you say to your manager, look, I think I need to move away for the sake of my career, there's potential that not everyone would be so understanding. So did you ever experience kind of differences in opinions? And how did you navigate those to make sure that you did the right thing for you?
Yeah, Vic and I, as soon as I signed at the club, we were very, very close. I think that's mainly due to I was quite a young kid at the time. He kind of put his arm around me and nurtured me, and obviously knew that I was a very good player. And I did feel like I was letting him down by going, and that was very hard for me to speak about that and to get that across, because I felt loyal to him to stay at the club, but I said that the game in this country at this time is just not enough for me. We were training 2 evenings a week, that was it, and it just wasn't filling my needs. I needed to be doing more, and he understood. He wished that the game was where it is now, in terms of the professionalism and everything that was coming along with the game now. But yeah, he really understood, and I was lucky because I didn't want to get on bad terms with him because we had such a respect for each other. So yeah, I think just being honest and open with certainly our relationship, that's what all we had to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and that probably goes a long way, more than people can realize, because actually your points were so valid that he couldn't have said any different to that. Kelly, I'm conscious of time, and there's a big question that we generally try to ask towards the end of our interviews, and we'll hopefully fit in a couple of the audience questions as well. So forgive me for this is a big question, so any answer is welcome. Even shut up, Jamie, that's a rubbish question. But obviously at Vitality, positive behaviour change is kind of central to our programme, and helping people make better decisions about their health is kind of our core purpose. So looking back at everything that you've been through, I told you it was a big question. What would you say was the one change or one thing that you've done that's had the biggest impact in your life? Whether that be dealing with the one thing. I'll give you an example. I don't want to put an answer in your head, but you mentioned earlier about kind of like how opening up and talking helped you deal with the changes, but it could be small habits, it could be anything.
Yeah, I think reflection and self-improvement, always trying to improve and be better every day. Especially I'm relating it to my football in the rehab room. If the physio asked me to do 10 leg presses, I would do 13 or 14 because I wanted to be back quicker. And reflecting on how I dealt with the injuries and trying to improve and learn from that and be a better person the next injury. I think that's what I would suggest. I'd also write down some goals. Each game that I played, I would write. I wore a piece of tape on my arm, and I'd just write 3 small goals for me to focus on in the game. If I'd lost my head a little bit in the game, or I just look down at my wrist and see like 3 things that I want to focus on. So I think those small goals throughout the games and throughout, you just learn and you develop and try and progress and be better from that.
That is interesting. Kelly, are you able to share like an example of what those things might have been? Like I would put score more, win, but what sort of, was it? I assume it's different per game, but like any examples?
It depended on how I was feeling going into the game, or who I was up against, or the result from the previous game. An example would be win your 1v1 battle. So obviously if I was a striker, which I was, I'd have to win my duel with the centre half. And once you start feeling the rhythm of the game and winning those battles, you kind of take ownership and you grow in confidence against that player, and then the team picks up on that. So that would be an example. It would be to, if you get a clear-cut opportunity, just hit the target, hit the net, or it could be just stay focused, because if something happens, if a tackle comes in on me, which I've been known to have some quite horrific tackles because of the elite player that I was, I've looked down at my wrist and stay focused, because the players would want to get me angry, to get me sent off. So I just look down and say, okay, stay focused, just let that one go. The next time you get the ball, pass it one touch, that kind of thing. So just little reminders.
I think that's great. I think there's a good example of that as well last night in the Champions League game between Man City and Atletico Madrid. They kept their cool well, but it's a great piece of advice. And I think probably be loads of kids running around this weekend with a bit of tape around their arm, I hope. Kelly, we're going to just jump into a few of the questions that we've had from our viewers, because there's been so many of those. So this is my attempt at some form of like quick fire questioning. So the first one I'm going to jump into is kind of, you were part of a super successful generation of players, particularly at Arsenal. Are there any other players or professionals that you look to when you were going through your challenges that either inspired you in your toughest moments or kind of kept you going? And if so, what is it about it could be anyone, it doesn't have to be another player, but about others that helps you and that you admire? What qualities is it?
Faye White was a player. She was captain of England. Similar to me, had quite a few injuries in tournaments, and she was a leader. She led by example. I would say I kind of looked up to her on the pitch, and the way that she dictated and controlled the back line. I would say her Hope Powell was another one who helped me through my troubles. And I remember her saying to me, Kelly, I don't care if you ever play football again. I just want you to be a healthy person. I want your mind to be right. And for a manager to say that to you, it was more like as a human being, not as a manager. Like player to coach thing, it was like a friendship. Like she just wanted me to be okay. That was another person that I really looked up to throughout my whole career. She was the manager for 16 years, I think, of England, that I played under her. And her leadership was amazing, guiding players in the right way, getting the best out of them. Rachel Yankee of Arsenal also, someone that I played alongside, very talented player, wouldn't take any crap from anyone, and if someone got her, you knew she had your back, kind of thing.
Yeah,
you that spring to mind.
I love that. There's some good highlight videos on YouTube of you and Rachel playing together, and I can tell she was a pretty good teammate as well. Another good question that we've had, which I think is quite interesting, is that someone's put here, in their opinion, resilience and motivation are important, but I think persistence is the key. What's your view on persistence and how does that fit in?
I think resilience and persistence are kind of the same thing. Go hand in hand. I was very persistent on getting back as soon as my back after every injury, and I don't think if you don't have resilience and persistence, then you're never going to achieve anything in life. You have to believe in yourself, I think, because if you don't believe in yourself, then who else is going to believe in you? I think that has to come from within, from your own experiences. And being persistent. I didn't give up. I could have given up when I was told not to play football at the age of 8. I chose not to, and my decision would have been reversed, I would have given up. I would never have played for Arsenal. I'd never gone to America being a professional, never played for England, never scored 117 caps and got 46 goals. So if I just wouldn't have been persistent, none of that would have been happened.
It's kind of the place it all starts, and that leads pretty nicely.
Keep going.
Just
there's going to be barriers. In anyone's career, especially mine, it's never going to go like that, is it? Yeah. No one's life or career goes like that. There's peaks and flows, ebbs and flows, and it's how you come back from the dips and keep going. Then you're going to get another one, and how do you come back from that? You have to use your resilience and your mindset to bring you back and stay focused.
It seems like probably the most important factor in your career. And there's one final question, Kelly, that I'm going to try and fit in, which I think is kind of related to what you just said. I think that life is, like you say, about those moments and how you deal with those. I think we might have touched on the answer to this one, but are there any moments in your career that you remember as being that defining thing, whether it was a particular challenge that you faced, or a performance maybe, or a decision that you felt really changed the trajectory of what you were going to achieve?
Yeah, it was my last injury playing for Arsenal. It was quite a bad tackle. I was crossing the ball in, and the girl absolutely chopped me from behind, and I felt pain instantly in my ankle. And I tore 3 ligaments off the ankle bone, and I was 30, I want to say 35. So, you know, coming to the end of my career, and that injury potentially could have ended my career. But in my mind, a lot of people were saying, oh, she's done now. You know, that's too many injuries. She's never going to get back from that one. It's another one. And there was something inside me that just thought, I'm not letting this, another long-term injury. I was out for 7, 8 months on this injury. And the devastation of it too, and the impact of the tackle really hurt my mind emotionally, because I just felt it was such an unjust tackle and timed so badly. Anyway, I didn't let that, in my mind, people wrote me off and said, oh, finished. And I didn't want that tackle to ruin my career. So in my mind, I said, right, you will get back from this, and you will. I always had it in my mind, I wanted to win the FA Cup. And in the last season of Arsenal, and I got myself back, and I wasn't in 100% shape because of the injury, but I was still playing, coming on the bench, and I managed to start the FA Cup final in 2016. And I knew going into this game that this was my last season, and we had to win the FA Cup, because that's something that I set my mind on. We beat Chelsea, we're underdogs, and we beat them 1-0 at Wembley. And for me, that was just like such joy, because I didn't give up, and I didn't let people write me off. I come back, and I still won the FA Cup with Arsenal my last season, and that for me was just pure joy because of my mindset to get back and do that. Obviously my teammates, it wasn't just me that won the FA Cup, it was the whole squad, but that we had a common goal and we wanted to do that, and certainly that was my goal.
Yeah, it's almost like payoff. And I think it sounds to me like the worst thing anyone could do to you is write you off, because it will bite them back 10 times harder. And Kelly, your story is such a great lesson in, like you say, resilience, not giving up, but the power of having that mindset to get through anything. And you got the ending that you deserved in a way, by the sounds of that. And honestly, it's been so inspiring chatting with you today. I think your story is filled with kind of moments which are unique, like those tackles are really bad, but also things that we can relate to in our own lives, because a setback is a setback. And as cheesy as I know it sounds, we are a product of our daily kind of actions. And you've shown the value of turning up, following your passion, and not letting the challenges define you. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. It kind of puts things in perspective as well, because you've been through a lot.
No, thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and yeah, thank you for Vitality and yourself for having me on.
Amazing. Well, we'd love to do more with you. And for everyone watching as well, thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed this session. And please do let us know what you think as well. There's a feedback form on your way out. And hopefully you'll join us again for some more of our future events as well. So in the meantime, yeah, good questions as well, to be fair. There's a load that we'll also have to come back to at another point, I'm sure. But Kelly, from you and I, thank you again. Take care, everyone watching. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great long weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.